box where you're joining from today. So it's interesting to hear where people are from. And we'll be keeping an eye on the questions as we go through the webinar today as well. So definitely keep them coming as we go through the webinar. So it looks like we've got Lincoln, Nebraska, New York, Vancouver, which is where I am today.
Nice.
Cincinnati, Ohio. Nice.
And another question. How much email does everyone get per day, roughly? We'll compare it with the statistics later.
Hmm. How much do you get, Dimitri? Just curious.
I get about 200, 250.
250, okay.
Yeah, but SaneBox actually takes probably two-thirds of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Do that.
Yeah, I'd say I probably get, it varies definitely from day to day, but anywhere from 150 to 300,
Yeah.
depending on what's going on. And yeah, I'd say SaneBox probably takes care of a good, at least 75% of that goes into
Yes.
filtered folders. Yeah.
Jared gets 500 to 700 emails. Yikes.
Oh,
Sorry, Jared. We'll help you today, hopefully.
in my days as a project manager, I can actually remember getting 500 emails a day, and in addition to, it seems every time I stepped away from my desk, I'd get a voicemail, and that was quite a few years ago too. So I can't even imagine what it's like now. And we got 60. That's a little more manageable.
Ah, Jared, nice. You're you're a fan.
Nice.
So, folks, should we get started?
Sounds good to me.
All right, let's do it. Can everybody see my screen? Can anybody not see my screen?
Yeah, it seems to be
Perfect.
showing up fine.
Excellent. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, let's get started. So, yeah, the topic today is how to tame your email. And so a little bit more about me. I'm a co-founder here at Sanebox, and the reason the reason I have some data to share with you today is since we started the company 6 years ago, we've noticed some patterns. We noticed that there are some people that are really good at email, and there are some people that are terrible. And so what we will address today is just some of the best practices that we found that some of the more productive emailers use, and how we can apply them to everybody. And we'll also cover how SaneBox helps out with that. But really, the goal is for you to come out of this with just kind of with some actionable takeaways that you can start doing today, whether or not you whether or not you use SaneBox to help you. Yeah, so yeah, my background is I spent a few years at when I started my career in investment banking. Then I spent a few years at Yahoo, Overture, and then we got acquired by Yahoo. And so I'm the growth guy here at Sandbox. And I think everybody knows Tim.
Yeah, hi everyone. If we haven't met before, I've had a company called Technically Simple since 2003, and prior to that, I was working in the corporate world for about 13 years. And Technically Simple has gone through a few incarnations over the years, but the two of the key things I'll be talking a little bit about later are Learn OmniFocus and a brand new site called Holistic Productivity that launched literally last month.
Nice. Nice. All right. Yeah, I guess stay till the end. We'll have a little bit of a free gift for you later. Oh, and also, if you don't stay till the end, that's actually fine too. We're going to send out a link to the recording and the gift as well. So you should see it in your email later today. All right, so what we'll talk about is a couple of things. So we'll start with just some kind of high-level theory, and just kind of the philosophy behind better email management. Then we'll dig into the tactics around Inbox Zero, which I'm sure, Tim, are your is your audience relatively familiar with Inbox Zero? How?
Yeah, I think it's pretty much a household term, and yeah, and I had the opportunity to meet Merlin Mann in San Francisco a few years back, who's the one who coined this term. So I
Nice,
think it's also a misunderstood term, and I think you touch on that as you go through today.
definitely.
Yeah.
And we'll wrap up with some just short, actionable email hacks that you can start using right now and make your life better quickly. Right, so just some really quick stats, which I'm sure a lot of people are relatively familiar with. So an average office worker, which is really pretty much any professional with a laptop based job, which is I think all of us at this point. So the average person gets about 150 emails a day. So yeah, if you get 60, that's I'm really happy to hear that. That's amazing. And as a result of this, we spend about 2.5 hours a day reactively dealing with email. And if you think about it, that's kind of crazy considering doing email is not part of anyone's job description, unless you're doing customer service. And so the fact that you spend almost a third of your time on this completely reactive activity that's nowhere to be found in your job description is pretty crazy. And so the sad part is because of this, it affects our to-do list, it affects our focus, and even our mood and health. And there's been a lot of studies done on that over the years as well. So, why is this such a big problem? It's distracting, right? It's distracting to your focus. And there's been a really interesting study done a while ago on the fixed versus variable reward system. So we have the study included basically two groups of rats, and one group had a lever, and based on how many times you press the lever, let's say 10 times or 20 times or 100 times, but a consistent number of times, the rat would get a reward. So you press the lever 100 times, you get a treat. And then there was another group of rats with a variable reward system where it was completely random. So it could be it's like a slot machine. And so the second group of rats with the variable reward system was way more addicted to email. Sorry, to pressing the lever than the first group. And so this is the same thing with email. There's this kind of the same slot machine effect. When you check your email, you could get an important email from a customer, or something good could happen. Most of the time, it doesn't. But because of this kind of a slot machine effect, it's very addicting. And on top of this, there's this the problem of completion bias. By checking off emails from your inbox, it feels like you're being productive, like you're doing something helpful, but that's actually not the case at all. In fact, it's completely not helpful, and it's costing you progress on your actual long-term projects. So what can we do about this? And now we're getting into kind of the high-level principles behind better email management. So we call it the 3 email commandments. The first one is email is like Tetris. No matter how good you are, more emails will keep coming, and they keep coming faster. And we see in our data that an average person gets about 7% more emails every year. So your volume is increasing, just like in Tetris. And so eventually you lose. Right? So if today you're spending 2.5 hours a day, next year is going to be 7% more, and then next year 7% more. So it's something has to change. You cannot win. You cannot beat the game, and the thing that has to change is you. Unfortunately, you have to change the way you think about it, your process, and your tools. So that's kind of the stage for this next commandment, and this is probably the most important takeaway that I would love for everybody to remember from this webinar. And this is email should not be your default number one priority. For too many of us, email has become this kind of unconscious top priority, right? So the first thing you do when you wake up, you look on your phone. The first thing you do when you know, get to your desk, open your laptop, and you know, start answering emails. And the problem with this is that your inbox is essentially a to-do list that other people write on for you. So it's if unconsciously doing email is your number one priority, that means other people's priorities are your number one priority. And so the best way to deal with this is we call it a scan, block, ask system. So the first thing you do, you know, scan your when you do you know, look at your phone in the morning or you do open your laptop, it's okay to look at your email and scan for important and urgent emails. So like the real fires that need to be put out. And then close your inbox and get to work on your own to-do list, right? Not other people's. And you can do this comfortably knowing that you also block off email time in your calendar. So I have an appointment at 11 o'clock every day for email time. It can be half hour, it could be hour, it could be 2 hours. It really depends on on where email falls in your priorities. But the important thing is it needs to be under control. You need to time box it and make sure that you put it into your overall list of priorities. And then last but not least, if you ever get sucked into kind of doing email, just ask yourself, is this the best use of my time right now? And most of the time, the answer probably will be no.
Just one thing to add in, Dimitri, is when I'm checking email, I often actually set a timer. I'll say for 25 minutes, I'll just get as much as I can get done. And when I know I've got a finite amount of time to do it, I'll tend to be much more efficient, and I'll naturally sort of gravitate to, given that I can't deal with all of it, you know, what are the ones that are really worthy of my time given. So it's kind of one of those cases where less is more. I think having less time can actually make things a lot more productive.
I'm going to steal that from you. That's a great idea.
Cool.
Let me write that down. All right. All right. So, and this brings us to the last commandment. And so, when you are in your email time, and this Tim touches on the point you just made, kind of prioritizing the more important ones. And the issue here is that every email client, webmail, device gives the same amount of space on the screen to every email. And so a newsletter that you never read, subconsciously to your brain, looks exactly like an email from your top client. I mean, yes, after you think about it, you realize it, but it takes cognitive cycles for your brain to differentiate. And the solution is there are really three kinds of emails. There's unimportant, noise, and this is the stuff that just needs to be processed, archived, or deleted in bulk being the key. And there's the important and urgent stuff that needs to be dealt with now. And then there's the important, not urgent stuff that can be dealt with later. And so the question is, when is that later? And how do you how do you snooze it so that you don't keep looking at it every time you look in your inbox and keep processing that same question. And now this is when we get into inbox zero. And yeah, I think Tim, to your point, it is a bit of a misunderstood term. I think a lot of people think that inbox zero is just the act of having no emails in your inbox. Is that what you were referring to?
I find people often think that they've dealt with everything in their inbox and they call that inbox zero. Whereas I see it more of a processing and like a triaging, as I know you're going to talk about in a moment, that really achieves that state. And just really using the inbox as a collection point. As you mentioned earlier, that's kind of the to-do list that people write on. And then just deciding what to do with things that land in the inbox. And as we'll touch on later, SaneBox can take care of some of that work automatically by filtering things in the background.
Exactly. Okay. Oh, perfect. Yeah. So, and I'm sure most people are familiar with the idea of triage, but really it started a while ago. It was invented by one of Napoleon's surgeons who used it to determine the priority of treatment for patients. And what's interesting is when the wounded soldiers came into the medical tent, everybody was treated the same way. They would get kind of processed in the same manner, whether you were a soldier, whether you were a general, or a enemy soldier. Um, so that was kind of an um, interesting tidbit that I recently learned. And so essentially there are three kinds of soldiers and emails. There's noise, and these are the emails that should need to be, and if you think about that's the unimportant stuff we talked about earlier. So it's stuff that needs to be deleted or archived, whatever you prefer. But again, the key is in bulk. Then there's the quick fix, stuff that takes less than 2 minutes to do, and this is your defer, delegate, or respond bucket. So defer meaning snooze it, delegate meaning forward it, and respond meaning reply and archive. And if you do those four things, then the only emails left will be the ones that you will work on. The stuff that actually requires serious processing, serious work. And so that's where really the bulk of your time should be spent on. So, and this is, by the way, we started Sanebox with this idea in mind, and we built our features to kind of to help you manage this process more effectively. And so I'll actually let me just show you how what it looks like. So this is our demo account, but as you can see, so there's by the way, this is a Gmail, obviously, but Sanebox works with any email provider, any client, any device. So anywhere you do email today, we will work. And the reason for that is we simply create a folder on your mail server. So you'll see that folder on any kind of email interface that you're using currently. So there's nothing new to install, nothing new to learn how to use. And so when you first sign up, what happens is we analyze how you interact with your inbox in the past. We look at what emails do you open, what emails do you respond to, how quickly you open them, how quickly you respond, how often, how far back, and so on and so on. And based on this, we know what's important to you. And so we take all of the stuff that's not important and move it into this same later folder. So as you can see, it's just, it's newsletters, it's stuff that you don't care about in the past. The best practice here, we don't claim to be 100% accurate. We're probably in the beginning we're 95% accurate, and then we get close to 99. But we highly recommend that everybody goes through this unimportant folder. I do it once a day, sometimes twice a day. I rarely do it on the weekends. And just scan through it. And the trick here is our brain is really good at pattern recognition. So it's very easy for us to look at a kind of a sea of noise and spot something that's important, right? So let's say if this email deserves a closer look, I can, if I want to continue seeing those emails in my inbox in the future, I just move it to my inbox, and all future emails like this will from now on go into the inbox. Now, if I never want to see an email like this, I would move it into this folder called black hole, and all future emails from that sender will go straight to trash. So it's like unsubscribing, but just easier and faster and safer. And we'll talk about actually why it's a better way in a little bit. And then you can also customize additional filtering folders. So you can make one for instance, for family, and start moving emails from your family into that folder, and we'll learn immediately what kind of stuff you'd like to see where. And then, so the point is, after you've done, after you've kind of gone through your send later folder, just select all and hit delete. And so you would process all of these emails with one click, as opposed to kind of going, if they were in your inbox, you would have to one by one go through and painstakingly deal with it. So okay, so that's the unimportant stuff. So now we dealt with this. Let's deal with the quick fix. So if an email is important but not urgent, like this one actually says important but not urgent project, most of us tend to leave it in our inbox. And some people have a kind of a defer folder according to inbox zero functionality mentality. But the problem with leaving it in your inbox is every time you look at it, or every time you are in your inbox, you will spend at least a split second, but probably more, thinking about it, and so that, again, that takes you out of your focus. And so, and if you move it into a kind of a folder you create, a defer folder, then you have to go through the defer folder and again think about it. So we've come up with a really kind of elegant solution. You can just drag that email into a folder called tomorrow. It's going to pop back in your inbox tomorrow morning. Or you can drag it into a folder called next week. It's going to pop back into your inbox on Monday morning. Another efficient way of doing this is to simply forward an email to what we call a sane reminder address. And the way that works is you just forward it to, say, 3 days at sanebox.com, or you could put Monday 9 a.m. at sanebox.com, or you could put February 22nd at sanebox.com. By the way, this is a great way to snooze. I forward all of my travel itineraries to the date I'm traveling, and that makes sure that all of my information is right in my inbox when I need it. So it's just essentially sends your future self a reminder that way. So yeah, this works for snoozing, and also, but yeah, so if you send an email to this address, then it's going to appear in your inbox. Now, so let me just do that really quick. So we've dealt with the defer bucket. So now let's talk about delegate and respond.
Oh, and just one thing to add there too, you had like saying tomorrow and saying next week, and those are all customizable. So if you wanted to add say Wednesday or there's also a vacation one, which is a really nice feature to have. So if you're on vacation, you can just drop the emails in there and they'll show up when you're back at work, back from vacation, so you're not kind of staring at them the whole time.
Yeah, yeah, and we have a lot more stuff that we do, but it's we have too many features to cover today, so I'm gonna focus on just the really basic and bug zero ones. But yeah, there's a lot of customization we can do.
It's what I like about SaneBox. I've been using it for a few years now, and it's something you can use right out of the box, so to speak, in a very simple way and still get a lot of benefit. But then, as you want to get a little fancier with it and sort of fine tune the processes, there's a lot of functionality waiting for you if you ever need to use it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So when you reply to an email, you can hit reply, and you can CC. And by the way, this is our most, besides the black hole, this is our second most popular feature. So you can CC or BCC, same thing. Let's say 1 week at sanebox.com. And so if you, well, okay, so if you BCC it, and this person doesn't reply to you by this time, we'll send you a reminder. So it's like a really lightweight CRM right in your inbox. If you want to get a reminder regardless of whether they get back to you or not, add the word keep to it. So keep.1week at sanebox.com, and you'll get a reminder in any case. And my personal favorite trick is if it's something, if I'm sending it to somebody external, a customer, I would normally put it into BCC. So this way they don't know that I'm tracking them. If it's somebody on my team and I want to kind of set the expectation that, hey, this is kind of the deadline, I put it in the CC field, and then the person knows kind of what I'm expecting.
Actually, this is one of my favorite features of SaneBox. Like, I can't even imagine working without this, and because so often I'll email someone, and the chance of hearing back might be maybe 20% in some cases, and because I know people get busy, they're not necessarily that good about keeping on top of their emails. So it's just it makes it so easy for me to keep track of responses without having to spend a lot of time doing it. So it's, yeah, to me, it's worth using it just for that one feature alone.
Same here. Yeah, I couldn't imagine doing my job without it at this point.
I didn't know about the keep feature, so that's something I've learned today.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and the other thing that's actually really useful, and this is less of a CRM thing, but more of a kind of sending yourself a reminder. You can send a reminder to every, say, so I have one for every Friday at 8 a.m. And so now, and I can put something in the subject or the body, and now I get a reminder every Friday at 8 a.m. With that subject. So it's like it's really efficient reminder system. Okay, so we talked about this. But yeah, so we talked delegating or responding works the same way. And then, yeah, the only emails left will be the ones that you deal with today. And my personal guilty pleasure is at the end of the day, if I didn't finish something, I drag it into the tomorrow folder, and I finish my day with inbox 0. And this stuff still pops back in my inbox in the morning, but it actually is. It feels very good, and it is good for your productivity to do that. So highly recommended. So that's well, again, there's a lot more that we can do, but let's not dig into it. So now let's talk about advanced email hacks. So these are just really short blurbs, and I'll go through it really quickly. So please stop me if I'm going too fast. One of the easiest things you can start doing right away is, if your email is long, highlight the key takeaway or the action item. And the best way to do it is in bold, in my opinion. You can do all caps, but that can come off the wrong way. And yeah, so you don't do too much of it, but if you bold just the right things, it's a really effective communication tool. So it makes your recipient's job much easier. This one doesn't really have anything to do with email, but your email is kind of at least for me, it's everything in my life is there, and I really want to make sure it doesn't get hacked. And so all of us at Sanebox use 1Password. You can also, there's a couple of other alternatives, LastPass being the other mainstream one. And what those tools do is they create a unique and really, really, really hard to guess password, for unique one for each site that you're using, and it stores it right there on your in your browser. There's a mobile app, so you never have to remember it. And then the only password you would need is to create a password for your 1Password. And the trick there is to think of a phrase that you know by heart. And as you are saying that phrase to yourself, write or type the first letter of the word in. And so what this here says is, Billie Jean is not my lover. She's just a girl who claims that I am the one. And you can capitalize the I. You can put number 1 instead of the 1 just to make it a little bit better. And yeah, as you can see, like this would be pretty difficult to guess. But I love Michael Jackson, so I never have to remember this. It's very straightforward. Now, something I learned just last week, actually, from one of the security experts, is some of the hackers are starting to crack this. And as always with security, you always have to keep iterating and staying ahead of the bad guys. So they've started to develop algorithms to basically to figure this out, to figure out commonly known phrases and use this. So the best thing is to come up with a phrase that only you know, but again, you know by heart. Again, and longer the better. Capitalization is super helpful, and numbers are very helpful. This is one of my favorites. So every email client interface, again, kind of forces you to, the order in which you write an email is usually recipient, subject, body, and then attachment at the bottom. And this is actually broken. It should be the other way around. If you need to include an attachment, like if the email is about the attachment, then you should probably start with the attachment first. This way you don't forget it. Then type up the body. Then once you type up the body, proofread it. Now you know what the subject should be because you can summarize it. And when you're done proofreading everything, then you can actually type the recipient's name. And so this avoids this accidental send, which I am very, very guilty of myself. Gmail's undo send has saved my life many, many times. But if you're not using Gmail, then reversing the order is a really good hack.
I think another benefit of that is if you've already written the email, it's easier to decide who to send it to. Whereas if you're not quite sure what you want to say, then the tendency might be to send it to more people than is really needed.
Exactly, exactly. All right, so and then we talked about this one like, briefly, but yeah, a lot of people use their inbox as an archive, and I have a lot of friends who do this, and I think it's just terrible. So Tim, kind of like you said, your inbox is really for unprocessed stuff that you haven't touched yet, and leaving stuff there when you're done is just like opening your physical mailbox, taking out the envelopes, reading them, and then stuffing them back in. It just doesn't make any sense. So the solution there um, is to create a new folder, call it old mail, and move unimportant stuff into that folder. And now you're at Inbox Zero. You can still find those emails whenever you want to, but it's a good way to give yourself a fresh start. Um, Using the subject wisely. So a lot of times subject might be the only thing that your recipient reads. So putting make it actionable, make it meaningful, make it searchable. You can put tags like, for instance, urgent or time sensitive. If there's an action item, put action item. If it's if this doesn't require a reply, put no need to reply, NNTR, or NRN, no reply necessary, or FYI, which everyone knows. One of my favorites is putting not urgent in the subject. It just removes a lot of stress, and it's almost like adding time back into your day. So we talked about this one a little bit. Unsubscribe. We see this all the time with our customers. When you go on an unsubscribe tear and unsubscribe from a bunch of stuff in your inbox, a lot of times you end up on more mailing lists. And this is basically because you're exposing yourself as a real human who cares about their email on top of it. And so you become a spammy marketer's dream come true, and they can just sell your address to more spammy marketers. So this is why we developed SaveBlackHole. So SaveBlackHole is it's essentially like unsubscribing, but easier, faster, and safer because you are not exposing yourself as a human. Avoiding open-ended questions. So email is a fantastic medium for closed-ended, focused communication. It is not a fantastic medium for open-ended, unfocused communication. So if you end your emails with thoughts question mark, that's probably a sign that it should be a call instead of an email. So yeah, making kind of a multiple choice selection is much more helpful.
One thing to add there too is I think one source of a lot of email volume is scheduling meetings. So rather than saying, when is a good time to meet, you could just say, here's 3 times that I'm available. Let me know, what works for you. Or if you do a lot of calendar stuff, you could even use something like Calendly or Schedule Once or something like that, just to get people access to your calendar, and that can just little things like that. It's amazing how they can reduce the amount of email flow.
Yeah, exactly. But we use Calendly at Sandbox, and it's fantastic. It definitely cuts out a lot of the back and forth. And so, and this one isn't really a hack per se, but this is just an observation. And so, early on when we first started Sanebox, our first customers were pretty much exclusively CEOs and venture capitalists who got a lot of email. And still, I think half of the half of the VCs in the US use us today. And so when talking to them, we realized that they get, well, not all of them, but there are some that get 1,000 emails a day. And somehow they get to Inbox Zero every day. And some of them even respond to every email, which I don't know how they do that. So the way, after we kind of think about this, you realize that the reason they do this, or the way they're able to do this, is they have a system, they use the right tools, and they think about it differently. They have a different process. So they think about email the right way. They're much more conscious of kind of the role that it plays in their life, and they keep it under control. So if somebody with 1,000 emails can do it, the rest of us with 150 can definitely get to inbox zero if we choose to. And this is it for me. Tim, did you want to
Yeah, sure.
take
I'll
over here?
just
Oh,
flip the
oh,
screen over
actually,
to
sorry.
my side.
So really quick,
Okay.
before I forget, so we have if you want to try Sanebox, and you'll get this in the email as well. But if you just go to sanebox.com/learn OmniFocus, you'll get a $25 credit uh, to sign up. And if you sign up already during the during the webinar, just reach out to our support team, support@sanebox.com, and we'll credit your account anyway. And then also we have a lot more hacks in our ebook called Email Hacks, not surprisingly. So it's 99 cents on Amazon, but you can get it for free here. So bit.ly/sanebox 100 hacks. All right,
Okay, awesome. I was just going through that yesterday. There's definitely a lot of great advice in there.
nice. All right, so Tim, I'm gonna
Okay.
pass. Can you grab the control
I
back?
think I can do it from my side. Yeah, looks like I can. And show my screen. Okay, perfect. So I just wanted to kind of to supplement what Dimitri was sharing. Just wanted to talk about a few best practices I've come up with. Some of them overlap with him, maybe a slightly different take on it. And these are all taken from a course, a brand new course that I'm launching later this month, which is called Taming Your Inbox. And I'll just briefly talk about what that course is all about in a moment. So just to get on to the suggestions, first ones are around just managing the sheer volume of emails that we get. And as Dimitri mentioned, unsubscribing or moving them into the same black hole can really make a big difference on just the number you have to deal with. And as he said, if you get an email from a provider that you didn't subscribe to, definitely not clicking unsubscribe, because you're telling them that you're actually somebody who's a real person who's looking at that email. So that's a good use case for the same black hole. If it is something you subscribe to and maybe it was a subject you were interested in years ago, but you've kind of lost interest, I wouldn't be shy about unsubscribing. And key point here is every time you look at an email, even if it's just to glance at the subject line, it's taking some of your time and attention. And as humans, we have a limited amount of that. That's very valuable. So generally speaking, I recommend having at least two accounts, one for work and one for personal, especially if you're not a business owner. If you're an employee somewhere, you probably don't want all your personal email mixed in with work. And if you leave the company or something, it's nice to know that those are clearly separated. Also, if it's the weekend and you're not really interested in seeing any work-related emails, this gives you kind of a natural filtering. You can just focus on your personal emails, or if it's a work day and you don't want to be distracted by personal things, you can just be looking at your work email. Filtering incoming emails, I think, is an essential practice for pretty much everybody. And this, I remember when I lived in Ottawa, I had these really nice neighbors who would always collect my mail when I went on vacation. And they'd not only collect it, but they'd sort it into two piles. And one would be all the stack of flyers, and the other one would be the important ones. And it was just really nice to get home from vacation and not have to dig through all of the flyers to get to like the bills to be paid and checks and things like that. So I see filtering email as essentially the same thing. It just puts the important things in front of you, and the other stuff you can kind of look at your leisure. And Sanebox, I've used filtering in Gmail and Apple Mail and things like that, and it worked well. But Sanebox is definitely the one that I recommend and I've stuck with for years. It just makes it really convenient. You can use any email system, so you can switch apps as you please and not have to worry about losing all of your filters and rules. So it's yeah, very very good. And I don't recommend many technologies, so I really vet the ones that I do recommend. This is getting back to a point that was mentioned earlier about just taking some blocks of time to process email. And if you've constantly got your email inbox box up on the screen, or you're getting notifications, then every email seems important. Whereas if you're just doing it in blocks of time, then it's easier to kind of judge which are the important ones, which are the least important ones as you see them all together. And then sometimes there's going to be an email that has multiple requests, or it's something that's maybe an entire project to deal with. And in this case, this is where I find email sort of fall short. You want to be using some sort of a task manager, and OmniFocus is my personal task manager of choice, but the same approach can be applied to many others as well. So if you do have actionable items, sometimes the best thing to do is just to create tasks out of that and then archive the email away and just track it through the task manager from there. Talking about OmniFocus, this is something I've been using fairly recently. There's a Sane Forward feature where you can actually have a special folder, and things that end up in that folder get forwarded on to a specific email address. And OmniFocus, as is the case with other task managers, has a special email address where if you send it to that, it's going to end up in the OmniFocus inbox. So there's certain emails that I receive that I know I want to create OmniFocus tasks out of. Maybe it's a hydro bill or something, and I just want to create a task to pay it. I'll train those into this at OmniFocus folder, and then without me having to do anything, they'll just show up in my OmniFocus inbox, and I don't even have to look at the email. So that I find that's a really nice feature. Just a few comments on composing emails, and I find most people don't compose emails very effectively. And if you're surrounded by people that don't compose them, one of the best ways to create a shift is to show them how it's done, to really model that behavior. So keeping the email specific, I think, is a key thing here. Don't reference like 12 different projects. Just get really specific on what is this email about. Make it actionable, or just giving a key piece of information. And this minimizes the number of people you need to CC or BCC on it. This is one that I do all the time. Sometimes an email thread gets going and you start off talking about the upcoming project, and then all of a sudden you're talking about the holiday party or something like that. Don't be shy about changing the subject line, so the subject line always relates to what's being discussed in the email. If possible, you can even use the entire the subject line for the entire message. So if you're just communicating that there's been a change to a meeting time, or it's going to be held in a different place or something like that, do your recipients a favor and just deliver the message fairly clearly, and you can use that EOM at the end to indicate that's the end of the message. Don't even have to bother checking the body of it. Using text expander snippets or something comparable is highly recommended. I think probably everybody types some of the same things over and over again, even if it's just your name or your phone number or something like that. There might even be like paragraphs of text that you tend to use over and over again. And just using text expander snippets, I find makes a huge difference. And with the newest version of text expander, you can even share them within a group, share them with other people. So if you write a response to a client, let's say, that's fairly generic, other people in your team can use that, and it's all carefully crafted, and you've done all the spell checking on it. And then lastly, just a few notes around using email within a team. Something I get into the course is the importance of actually coming up with an agreement on how email is going to be used within your team environment. And one thing can be around response time. So do your coworkers expect a response within 5 minutes, or is it a few hours, or is it just kind of ambiguous? So it's really useful to have that conversation, just come to a common agreement. Even with my clients, I'll let them know that they can expect to hear back from me within 1 business day, so they're not sitting there on Saturday afternoon wondering why I haven't gotten back to them. I just make it really clear on what to expect from me. Formatting of emails in a team setting can make a big difference. Maybe putting the name of the project in square brackets. As Dimitri mentioned, you can indicate if it's actionable or not, just so as people are going through their email without looking at the contents, they can know, is this something they need to act on, or is it something they can maybe read later in the week. So just to briefly mention my 2 main pursuits at the moment. So learnomnifocus.com is one, and I've got some, there's a webinar on there. It's actually a free recording, and you can watch it. It's called Taming Your Email with OmniFocus. So if you want to learn more about how to use OmniFocus alongside email, I definitely recommend checking that out. And during the webinar, I also feature SaneBox, and I talk about how SaneBox fits into that whole that whole scenario there. And just very recently, I launched a brand new website based on my holistic productivity approach. And this is an approach I've been developing for almost 10 years and leading courses on it. And I decided it was time it had its own presence on the web. And one of the first offerings on this is a course called Taming Your Email. And I'll just talk a little bit about what this course looks like. So it's a two-part course. This is something that you attend in person, so it's not one where you watch the recording later. This is really designed to be one you attend in person. And there's two parts, and they're 1 week apart. Each part is 90 minutes. And in part one, you're going to, we'll go into detail on best practices and things. You'll actually create your own personal email strategy. So there might be things that you say, yeah, that's a good idea, but it doesn't quite fit for the work that I do. So this is all about really personalizing how are you going to use email. And we'll look at some topics that I mentioned today, including the taming your inbox and writing effective emails, using email in a team. We'll go into more depth on that. And then you'll basically go away and you'll go back to your routine and you'll put all of this to the test and just see how it works. And there's some very specific things you'll do in the week in between. It might not be totally transforming your email experience, but there'll be some tangible signs of progress during that week, I'm sure, that'll really motivate you to keep going down that road. And then in the second part, you'll look at what worked and what didn't work and have the option to do some fine tuning to your own strategy. And then we'll get into some more advanced topics. We'll be covering SaneBox and doing some automation. We'll look at some efficient ways to compose emails and some project management solutions that you might want to use alongside email. One thing that makes this really unique is you'll be doing this within a video conference group, so you'll actually be able to see all of the other participants. You'll be doing some partner work as you go through it. The tool that I use, Zoom, allows these breakout rooms to create it, so you'll be doing some work with people and just doing some brainstorming with other people in the course. So it's very very interactive experience. You might even meet a new friend, who knows. So the first two courses, they start on February 23rd, and there's two groups. There's one group which is 10 to 11:30 in the morning Pacific Standard Time, and then there's another group in the afternoon. So depending on your schedule and time zone, you can choose one of those. So session one will be on February 23rd, and then the second session will be on March 2nd, and there's a limit to 30 people per group. So if you want to learn more about that, and if you'd like to register, you can go to holisticproductivity.net and then /calendar. And the regular price is $99 US to be a part of the course, and that'll allow, in addition to attending the course, you'll get access to a resource page that has some information, lots of links, recommended reading, things like that. But if you're part of this webinar, you can save 20%. Just enter the code SaneBox when you register, and that drops the price down to $79.20. And that'll just be available for these first two groups. So if you're motivated to really make a difference on email this year, that's definitely one place to go. Okay, cool. And shall we open it up to questions now, Dimitri?
Let's do it.
Yeah, okay. So just typing into the question box if you have any questions at all about best practices or SaneBox. Is a perfect time to ask questions about SaneBox. We've got the expert here.
Hey, we were so clear that there's no no questions.
One question that comes up sometimes is around the sane black hole, and so that's not the same as unsubscribing from an email, but it's just basically diverting messages to another location. Is that it?
Yeah, to trash.
Yeah, the trash. Okay.
Yeah, it's just it's really addressing that problem of being added to more spam mailing lists. It's just much safer and easier. So we certainly highly recommend it. Yeah, and that's probably our most popular feature, and with save reminders being the next one.
Would that be a replacement for like an anti-spam solution, or is it more something that complements it?
You would say black hole?
Yeah.
Uh, Not really. So, we think, and this is actually a great question. We are Sandbox is not meant to be a spam filter. Like we will catch spam, but you should really have a spam solution. Uh, we really deal with that next layer of noise, right? Not spam. Uh, so we do, in fact, like we work great with most spam systems, but with Black Hole, it's if you have a real spammy email, it should get caught by like a malicious, spam. It will get caught by your spam filter, and really, this is designed for stuff that you signed up for, maybe maybe didn't, that you just got added to, but is more of a kind of a more legit uh, than a prince from Nigeria trying to scam you out of stuff.
Yeah, cool. Or it could even be used for like I find sometimes I'll end up on a group email and it's just a bunch of people sending it to copying a bunch of email addresses into the to field and it can be difficult to get off those. So I could see that being another use for
Nice.
just saying, yeah, just don't let me know any more
Yeah.
emails around.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we have a
So
question from Adam. Oh, yeah. How do you use send reminders versus say no reply? Thank you. Great question. So send no reply is basically a folder that keeps all of the emails you sent that have not received a reply. So it's a good way to kind of quickly scan through it, and some emails there you weren't expecting a reply to, right? So uh, it's not as actionable. But so what I like to do is I go through that folder sometimes, and if I if something is really important, I will add a reminder address to it. So I'll forward it to a saved reminder address, and now I'm getting a proactive uh, reminder. So they work in tandem. Send reminders is really for it requires some action from you before you send it, but send reply is kind of like a catch-all, just to make sure nothing slips through the cracks. And another question is Sanebox for a single email ID, and what happens if you change email IDs at a later time? Uh, Another great question. So what we there's a couple of, it depends. If by email ID you mean an alias, then no. So what I do is I have a lot of my aliases forwarded into one Gmail inbox. In that case, I only need Sanebox on that one Gmail inbox. If you have multiple inboxes where you go to check, like to Tim's earlier example, uh, your personal and work, you would need Sanebox with each account.
and it's still one SaneBox account. You just need to have a package that allows you to have the number of email accounts as you have email addresses, essentially. Yeah. One thing to add there too is I think I alluded to earlier is I have been through an experience where I've switched email providers and I found SaneBox didn't miss a beat. Just kept all my same rules. I
All right.
didn't have to do anything special. So if you move from different providers, as long as the email address doesn't change, all of that stays the same. Yep.
Yeah, and I think one of the other questions, so you can add another address to it. So if you change email ID, yeah, you can absolutely do that, and all your settings remain.
If someone did, let's say the name of their company changed and their email changed along, address changed along with it, is there a way they could preserve all of their old trainings,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
would they essentially need to start from scratch?
No, no, no. Everything is preserved. If you want to make sure, just ping our support team. We'll
Yeah.
make sure
Okay.
nothing changes.
It's a fairly rare occurrence, but it does happen, yeah, once in a while.
Yeah. How often do you recommend someone checking their email daily? So if I'm starting off, maybe 3 times a day. Uh, it depends, right? It depends on kind of how many emails you get, how urgent they are. If 3 times a day feels right to you, that makes sense, right? That's probably as a default, that's a good starting point.
And one thing to add there is I find one of the challenges with that is I might need to check more often because maybe there's a client letting me know they're running 10 minutes late, or there might be something happening there. Maybe I'm going to be on a webinar and I want to make sure that I get notified if there's any information related to that. So my strategy is to, if it's somebody I really want to know right away when they send me a message, I'll put them on iOS, at least in Mac, you've got a VIP feature where you can say only notify me if somebody's on my VIP list, or you can even set a thread to be VIP. So if there's a response to a message in this thread, I want to know about it. Otherwise, I'll just go and check later.
Cool.
Yeah, and one other thing to add there too is if you're using something like SaneBox to filter the inbox, there's probably not going to be that many messages to check anyway. So checks tend to go much more quickly versus if every time you go to your inbox, you've got 30 emails to deal with.
Exactly.
Zad suggesting the unsubscribe by Jocelyn, is it Glee? I think is her last name, and that's high on my reading list. I haven't read it yet, but I've heard
Thanks.
really good things about it too.
Thank you. Is there an advantage, question from Jared, is there an advantage to using Unroll-Me with SaneBox? We have some people who do. We kind of do the same, the same, solve a lot of the same things. So it would work fine, but there's really no need. So we will catch everything that Unroll-Me catches. And by the way, the one big risk with Unroll-Me is they do actually try to unsubscribe you, uh, which creates the exposing yourself as a human problem. And we've seen that now. It's starting to come up much more often. All right. Folks, if nobody has any more questions, thank you for great questions and for paying attention.
Yeah, thanks everyone, and thanks Dimitri as well for having me on the webinar. Really great to be here, and thanks to everyone who attended today as well, and to those of you who are watching the recording.
All right. Thanks, folks.